Ever stop to think about the materials that, well, make up our world? Often completely invisible, but totally shaping everything around us.
Absolutely. From, the phone in your hand to the plane flying overhead.
Exactly. And a huge part of that, increasingly, is composite materials. Maybe something you haven't thought much about.
But they're becoming really fundamental.
Right. So today we're doing a deep dive into the Global Composite Market Forecast to 2033. We've got this great report here from Cognitive Market Research.
It's pretty comprehensive.
It is. And our mission today is basically to give you the quick version, the essential insights. We're talking big numbers, surprising growth areas.
And what it all actually means, practically speaking.
Exactly. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding where the innovation, the real action, is happening in composites.
Okay, let's get into it then.
Right. So first things first, to really get why this market's taking off, we need to be clear on what we're actually talking about. What are composites?
Good starting point.
The source defines them as basically engineered materials. They combine different components to get the best properties of each. Think superior strength to weight ratios.
Which is a huge one.
Huge.
Yeah.
And amazing corrosion resistance. So you get something potentially lighter than aluminum, but stronger than steel, and it won't rust.
Yeah, imagine that. That's why we see them in everything now, isn't it? High-performance bikes, parts of cars, airplanes.
Wind turbine blades, those massive things.
Oh, exactly. And that leads right into why they're becoming so important, right? The report makes this key point. Composites are increasingly replacing traditional materials such as metals and plastics.
It's a direct substitution happening.
It really is. It's not just about creating new gadgets, it's about fundamentally changing how we build existing things, making them lighter, stronger, last longer.
Okay, so what's driving this big shift then?
Well, the report points to a few core things. First, just straightforward advances in materials engineering. We're getting much, much better at designing and making these things.
Makes sense. Tech improves.
Then there's the whole sustainability angle. That's a massive driver globally now. Composites often mean lighter products, which means, say, better fuel efficiency in cars or planes. Or they just last longer, reducing waste.
Right, less replacement needed.
And finally, it's just surging demand from key industries. Automotive, aerospace, construction, they all want these properties. And, as you mentioned, renewable energy, especially wind power.
You put all that together, the material benefits, the green push, the industry demand.
Oh, yeah, you can see why the market's growing the way it is. It's kind of a perfect storm.
And the numbers definitely tell that story.
Yeah.
Let's look at the overall market size, because it's pretty striking.
Okay.
Back in 2021, the global market was already significant, nearly $100 billion. $97.334 billion to be exact.
So already a big deal.
Already big. But look ahead. The forecast for 2025 is about $127.5 billion.
Okay, steady growth.
But then jump to 2033, the projection is over $218 billion.
Yeah.
$218.642 billion. So it's more than doubling from that 2021 figure.
Wow, okay. That's substantial.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that works out to a compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of almost 7%, 6.977%, just between 2025 and 2033. That's solid, sustained growth.
Nearly 7% year on year for almost a decade? That's impressive for a market this size.
Definitely. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Let's break down where this growth is actually happening around the world,
Okay.
because it's not uniform.
Right. The regional picture is always revealing. So, starting with the biggest player,
Yeah.
Asia Pacific. It was the largest market back in 2021, pulling in around $33.5 billion, roughly a third of the global total.
Okay.
And it's projected to hit over $76 billion by 2033. Again, more than doubling. The CAGR there is strong too, just over 7%.
And within Asia Pacific, any standouts?
Well, China's the leader in terms of sheer value, as you probably guessed, about $10 billion in 2021, growing to over $21 billion projected for 2033.
Right.
But here's a fascinating detail from the report. Singapore. It has the highest CAGR of any country mentioned in the whole source, a remarkable 8.745%.
Well, okay. Singapore, nearly 9% growth per year. What does that usually point to?
It often suggests, really targeted strategic investment, maybe in high-tech manufacturing, advanced materials research, possibly becoming a regional hub for this kind of technology. It's a striking number.
It really is. Any others in APAC?
India is also showing very rapid growth, over 7.6% CAGR, so strong momentum there too.
Okay, so Asia Pacific is definitely leading the charge. What about Europe?
Europe's another major market, almost $26 billion in 2021 and projected to reach nearly $56 billion by 2033. So again, more than doubling.
And the growth rate.
The overall European CAGR is a bit lower than Asia Pacific, around 6.5%, 6.568% specifically. But within Europe, Russia actually shows the highest CAGR at 7.658%.
Interesting. Higher than the regional average.
Yeah. And then, just for contrast, the UK's AGR is mentioned as being comparatively lower, around 5.2%. Still growing, but not quite as fast.
And North America, how does it stack up?
North America is quite similar in size to Europe, actually, around $23 billion in 2021, projected to grow to over $50 billion by 2033.
Okay.
The CAGR is pretty much in line with Europe, about 6.6%. The U.S. naturally holds the lion's share of that market, over $18 billion back in 2021.
Right. But is there a growth leader within North America, like we saw with Singapore or Russia?
There is, yeah. Canada actually has the highest CAGR in North America, coming in at over 7.2%.
Huh. So Canada's outpacing the U.S. in terms of growth rate there.
Seems like it, yeah. 7.278%. Specifically.
It really is fascinating seeing how these, established industrial regions are adopting composites at slightly different speeds.
Yeah.
But let's maybe guide you, the listener, towards some regions that might fly a bit under the radar, but are showing some, frankly, incredible growth figures for composites.
Yeah, sometimes the really high percentage growth comes from smaller bases, but it signals big changes.
Exactly, like South America. The region as a whole has a very strong CAGR, almost 7.8%, 7.785%.
That's higher than Europe or North America's average.
It is. And get this, Colombia's CAGR is pegged at 8.352%. Really high.
Wow, over 8.3%.
And Argentina's not far behind either, at over 8%. What could be driving that, do you think? Big infrastructure projects, maybe?
Could be. Or perhaps a shift in manufacturing focus, trying to integrate more advanced, efficient materials. It definitely suggests something significant is happening there.
Okay, but hold on. If we're talking about the highest overall regional growth rate, the Middle East takes the top spot. An impressive 8.391% CAGR for the region.
That's the highest regional figure we've seen.
It is. And drilling down into that, the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, it boasts the single highest country CAGR in the entire report, a staggering 9.321%.
9.3%. That's massive year-on-year growth.
Incredible, isn't it? Turkey's also showing really strong growth in the region, around 8.4%.
So the Middle East, particularly the UAE, what does that level of growth typically signal? Huge construction, diversification efforts.
Could be all of the above, right? Massive urban development trying to build new industrial bases beyond oil, maybe large-scale solar or other renewable projects that use composites. It's clearly a hotspot.
Absolutely, a major focus area.
And finally, we shouldn't overlook Africa. It also shows considerable potential, with a regional CAGR just under 7.5%. So 7.489%.
Still very healthy growth.
Definitely. South Africa is highlighted with a growth rate near 8%, so 7.989%. And Nigeria is mentioned as having the largest market value within Africa currently.
So that suggests, again, maybe growing infrastructure needs, developing manufacturing sectors, adopting these materials.
Exactly. It paints a picture of modernization and development picking up pace.
You know, when you connect all these regional numbers back to the bigger picture, it really tells a story, doesn't it? It's not just abstract market data. Well, these varied growth rates, high single digits in the Middle East and parts of South America, strong growth in Asia, steady growth in Europe and North America, they reflect global shifts, don't they? They show where industrial development is booming, where infrastructure investment is heavy, or maybe where sustainability goals are being pursued most aggressively.
Right. Like the super high UAE number probably links to their big national development plans.
Exactly. Or Colombia's growth may be tied to specific infrastructure pushes. And the steady Asia-Pacific growth reflects its role as, the world's manufacturing hub, but one that's also upgrading to more advanced materials.
So the regional details really echo those initial drivers we talked about: engineering advances, sustainability, industry demand.
Precisely. You see where those drivers are having the biggest impact right now. It connects the why with the where.
Which brings us back to the core question, I suppose. What does all this mean for you listening? Whether you're directly involved in these industries or just, curious about where things are heading.
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
It means these composites, often unseen, are fundamentally changing industries we depend on every single day.
Yeah.
They're making things lighter, stronger, more efficient, more durable. It's a quiet revolution, but it's happening everywhere.
That's a good way to put it.
So just to recap, an absolutely incredible growth path for the global composite market, doubling in size in about a decade.
Huge numbers.
And These little nuggets of data, these regional KGRs, they show a world really shifting towards these advanced materials, but at different speeds in different places. It's redrawing the map of how things are made, in a way.
It really is. And that strong, consistent growth, that clear move away from just relying on traditional metals and plastics, it underscores the long-term nature of this shift. This isn't a blip, it's a fundamental change in how we think about materials.
For sure.
Which, leads to a really interesting final thought to leave people with. Given this massive expansion, the central role composites are now playing, what completely new things might they enable? What applications or even whole industries, maybe things we can't really picture clearly today, could become commonplace by 2033 because of composites?
Huh. Beyond just replacing old materials, what totally new possibilities open up?
Exactly. What becomes feasible that simply wasn't before? It's quite something to think about, isn't it? The potential is profound. It's amazing when you think about it, how often we actually bump into composite materials every day, sometimes without even realizing it.
Mhm.
I mean, from the fuselage on those next-gen planes, to those giant wind turbine blades you see out on the hills, or even parts hidden away in bridges.
Right.
These materials, they're not just for special cases anymore. They seem to be, well, fundamental now.
Absolutely foundational, yeah.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into the evolving world of composite materials. We want to unpack what's driving their use, what challenges are still out there, and maybe touch on some of the cool innovations shaping what comes next.
And yeah, for this dive, we've pulled together quite a bit of research looking at industry reports, some detailed analyses. Think of it as the key insights into material science's leading edge.
Okay, great. So let's start with the drivers. What's really pushing this composite boom? I guess the first big one has to be the push for lightweighting, right?
Yeah.
Especially in certain industries. You've got governments tightening up fuel efficiency rules, like the CAFE standards in the US or those co-Euro targets over in the EU. So when those rules get stricter, what happens? What do manufacturers do?
Well, it puts enormous pressure on them for efficiency.
Mm.
So manufacturers, they're increasingly looking at advanced composites. Things like, carbon fiber, fiberglass, because these let them cut weight, sometimes quite a lot of weight, without losing strength or performance. It's a tricky balance.
Especially when every kilogram, every pound saved counts towards fuel burn.
Precisely.
And we're seeing this in some really big ways, aren't we? Like the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, the Airbus A350, they use a lot of carbon fiber.
A huge amount. It's fundamental to their design for hitting those fuel savings and performance goals.
And the scale is pretty mind-blowing. Aerospace alone, they're saying, might account for, 25% of all composite demand by 2030?
Yeah, a full quarter. That's massive.
That's a huge piece of the pie.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, that kind of concentrated demand, it can ripple through the whole supply chain. Raw material prices, maybe where new factories get built. It shows a real long-term bet on composites.
Right, at the highest levels of engineering. Okay, so beyond planes, where else are composites really taking off?
Oh, you absolutely have to talk about renewable energy. Wind energy especially.
The blades.
Exactly. It's something like 90% of a modern wind turbine blade is composite material. Mostly fiberglass composites, actually. They need to be lightweight, but incredibly strong and, importantly, corrosion resistant. Think about what they're exposed to out there.
Yeah, massive structures, constantly battered by wind, rain, sometimes salt spray.
Right. It's hard to imagine making them out of much else that could handle that and be light enough.
And this ties directly into the whole net zero push globally, doesn't it?
It does.
Global wind capacity is forecast to, double by 2030. And that growth is driving something like 14% annual growth just in composites for wind.
Yeah, it's a major driver. And it's not just wind either. You see composites in solar panel frames too, because they don't corrode. And increasingly in hydrogen fuel tanks. Storing hydrogen safely means high pressure, so you need that high strength-to-weight ratio. Composites are perfect for that.
So strength, durability, lightweight. That seems to be the magic combo.
That's the key mix, yeah.
Okay, so we've got aerospace, we've got renewables. Where else are these materials making inroads? What about, say, construction?
Oh, absolutely. It's maybe less visible sometimes, but it's fundamentally changing construction and infrastructure. We're seeing a real shift away from traditional stuff like steel. Instead, they're using fiber-reinforced polymers, FRPs,
FRPs.
in bridges, seawalls, even whole prefab buildings now.
And there's a cost angle too, isn't there? Something about lower life cycle costs.
Yes, that's a huge selling point. FRPs can offer up to 50% lower costs over the entire life of the structure.
50%? Wow.
Yeah. When you factor in maintenance, repairs, replacement over decades, steel rusts, concrete cracks, these FRPs are much more durable in many environments.
That's a pretty powerful incentive for big long-term projects.
It is. And what's really helping push this along is policy support. Like in the U.S., the bipartisan infrastructure law, that's putting $110 billion towards projects.
Okay.
And a lot of those projects really need high-performance, long-lasting materials. So composites are often the best fit. It's like a top-down push.
So the government recognizing them as, well, not just an alternative, but maybe the necessary choice for hitting those infrastructure goals.
Exactly. It accelerates adoption.
Okay, so the growth story is clear. Lightweighting, renewables, infrastructure. But it can't all be smooth sailing. What are the hurdles? What are the challenges the composite market is facing?
Well, the big one, the one that's always been there, is cost. High production costs.
Right.
Carbon fiber, for instance, it's still quite a bit more expensive than, say, aluminum, maybe 5 to 10 times more.
Why is that mainly?
A lot of it comes down to the manufacturing process itself,
Yeah.
especially the curing. You essentially have to bake these materials in large ovens or autoclaves at very specific temperatures and pressures. It takes time, and it uses a lot of energy.
Okay, so energy-intensive processes. And then you mentioned end-of-life issues.
Yeah, that's another layer. Once a composite part is done, recycling it isn't straightforward. It can actually add maybe 15 to 20% to the disposal costs compared to just landfilling, though landfilling is obviously not ideal either.
So high initial cost, potentially tricky disposal.
Exactly. And that combination, those economics, can be a real barrier, especially if you're trying to get composites into, say, mass market cars where every penny counts.
Makes sense. Okay, what other challenges are out there? Supply chain seem to be a headache everywhere lately.
Oh, definitely. And composites are quite vulnerable there. Think about carbon fiber again. About 60% of the world's production, it's concentrated in just a couple of regions, mostly the U.S. and Japan.
So not much geographic diversity creates a bottleneck.
Precisely. And we saw what happens when there's disruption. During the pandemic, there were shortages of resins, the glue that holds the fibers together.
Right.
And that led to delivery delays of like 6 to 9 months for some composite parts.
Ouch. Yeah, that really hammered home the need for more diversified sourcing, maybe more local production hubs.
Absolutely. Resilience is key.
Okay, one more challenge you mentioned earlier was standardization.
Yeah.
And getting things certified. How does that work with composites versus older materials?
Yeah, it's a significant difference. Metals, like steel or aluminum, they have decades, even centuries of data. Really well-established testing protocols. Everyone knows how they behave.
Right, they're understood quantity.
Exactly. But with new composite formulations, especially for critical things like aerospace components, getting them certified can take, well, quite a long time, maybe 5 to 7 years.
5 to 7 years.
Yeah, compared to maybe 2 to 3 years for qualifying a new alloy of a conventional metal.
Wow. That must really slow down getting new innovations actually into products.
It absolutely does. It's a drag on innovation speed and market entry, no question.
So, okay, we have this picture of this incredibly capable material, but with some real-world challenges. High costs, supply chain risks, slow certification. But like you said, the story isn't over. Things are evolving. Let's shift to the exciting part, the future trends. What's changing? What's coming next? Starting with sustainability.
Yes, this is a really big focus now. The industry is actively working on making composites greener. One way is using bio-based resins. So instead of resins made from petroleum, they're derived from things like linseed oil, soy, other plant sources.
Okay, lowering the carbon footprint from the start.
Exactly. And also using more recycled carbon fiber, taking scrap from manufacturing or even end-of-life parts and finding ways to reuse those fibers.
And is this actually happening? Are companies adopting these green composites?
They are. Estimates suggest these already make up around 15% of new composite materials being used.
15%, okay. That's not insignificant.
No, and you have major players making big commitments, like BMW, Airbus. They've pledged to reach something like 30% recycled content in their composites by 2030.
That's a strong signal to the whole supply chain.
It really is. It drives investment in recycling tech and bioresin development.
Okay, greening the materials is one thing. What about how they're made? You mentioned additive manufacturing earlier, like 3D printing.
Yes, but it's a specific kind. It's 3D printing with continuous fiber reinforcement.
Continuous fiber, how does that work?
So imagine a 3D printer nozzle that isn't just laying down melted plastic, but it's precisely feeding a continuous strand of fiber, carbon fiber, glass fiber coated in a resin, and placing it exactly where it needs to go, layer by layer.
Ah, so you're building the structure with the reinforcement integrated right in.
Exactly. And this lets you create incredibly complex shapes, really optimized for strength and low weight that would be super difficult or expensive to make any other way.
And it's faster, too.
Oh yeah, some reports say up to 70% faster for certain parts, especially for prototypes or small production runs. It slashes development time and cost.
Are companies actually using this for real parts yet?
Absolutely. Companies like Lockheed Martin, for example, are already using this to make components for satellites. High stakes, high performance stuff.
Wow. Okay, that's impressive. And then, maybe the most futuristic sounding trend, smart composites with sensors built in.
Yeah, this is really pushing the envelope. We're talking about materials that can basically monitor their own health
Go.
by embedding tiny sensors, sometimes nanosensors like carbon nanotubes or special conductive polymers, right into the composite material itself as it's being made.
Okay. And what do these sensors do?
They can detect changes, tiny changes in stress, strain, maybe microscopic cracks starting to form. They can measure changes in electrical resistance or even how light passes through optical fibers embedded in the material.
So the material itself tells you if it's under stress or damaged in real time.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
It's like giving the structure a nervous system.
That sounds incredibly useful for things like pipelines, wind turbines, bridges, things where you really need to know if there's a problem developing.
Exactly. Critical infrastructure is a key application. Early detection of potential failures can prevent disasters, improve safety, and optimize maintenance schedules.
Is this a real market yet or still mostly research?
Oh, it's definitely becoming a market.
Okay.
Projections show it could hit over $1 billion, maybe $1.2 billion. By 2028, it's driven by that demand for predictive maintenance, making sure assets last as long as possible and operate safely.
Okay, so to kind of wrap things up, we've seen composites driven by the need for lighter, stronger materials in planes, cars, wind turbines, buildings. We've seen the challenges, costs, supply chains, certification hurdles.
Yeah.
But we're also seeing these really cool innovations, greener materials, advanced 3D printing, even self-monitoring smart composites. At its core, it seems the whole composite market is really about pushing the boundaries of what materials can do, making them lighter, stronger, and now smarter too.
I think that's right. And looking at the bigger picture, this industry is just becoming more and more critical, especially in a world that really values sustainability, high performance, and, well, design flexibility. Composites offer all three.
So as we leave you to think about all this, here's maybe a final thought to chew on. With these new capabilities emerging, especially things like smart, self-monitoring composites, how might that fundamentally change things? Not just the objects we build, but maybe the whole way we interact with our physical world, how we manage its health and its longevity over time. Something to ponder.